look at the top half of the standings, just 5 points separating Arsenal and Manchester City. And Man City have a game in hand. So let's hear from Mikel Arteta ahead of the North London derby.
We have a long season. Chapter 27 says, okay, we draw against Wolves in this manner. What I'm very interested is about the next one. Is what we are made of. Okay, what do we do about this? And how we write our own destiny from here and going forward. And that's it. And you have to react to that because life moves on. The result has to stay unfortunate as it was. There is nothing else we can do. What we can do is a lot, is what's going to happen next.
All right, let's welcome in James Olley as well as Stewart Robson. James, I'm going to start with you because let's be honest, Arsenal have been in this position before with Manchester City hot on their tails in terms of a title race. So tell me the truth, how tense is it around the Emirates?
Yeah, I mean, it's very tense. And I do think that some of this actually is Mikel Arteta's own making because, you know, in trying to foster a sort of closer connection with the supporters, he's been at the heart of these kind of hype videos that have come out before the game and the sort of messaging to fans of getting your seats early and every kick matters and live and breathe. And while I understand what he's trying to do with that, obviously, as I say, trying to foster that connection, what it's doing is it's heightening the tension around every home game. And I think the unintended consequence of all this is that it's made them feel as though every moment is potentially decisive in the title race. And we're talking about a team that's been like this for probably about 6 weeks, sort of since the turn of the year, maybe even just before Christmas. So if they're like that now, what are they going to be like in April when the heat is really on and the title is being decided? And that I think is the concern at the moment, that they're struggling just to bring the temperature down a little bit and just show the same sort of calm and authority of a team that's been there and done it before and knows they need to peak and have that kind of nervous energy later in the season.
Robert, what do you feel has gone wrong with your former club, Arsenal, during the last couple stretches of games?
Well, I've always said that they're over-emotional. They've been like that for several seasons. It all unravelling at the wrong time. So Arteta has got to make sure he calms everything down. He gets them back playing to the tempo and the ability they were playing with in for the whole of the season. And I think they will then win the league. But it's down to Arteta. He could win or lose the title for Arsenal.
All right, so question of mentality, Stevie. Of course, you've spoken about the defence, but take us inside the dressing room. All those things that Robbo just said that Mikel Arteta needs to do. How does he get this done?
Well, he has to take the air out the balloon, as you guys have been saying. You know, it's one thing at certain times during the season where a speech is good. It changes things, it lifts people, whatever it is, now and again. But I get the impression that it's a speech every week. And eventually that doesn't go anywhere. People stop listening. And all it does is put more pressure on. You know, I was lucky enough to play with a load of experienced guys who had won titles. And I couldn't believe the way they were acting 10 minutes before a game. They're all laughing and joking, and they're through in the players' lounge trying to figure out who won the last race at Ascot. You know, that's how you take the air out of the balloon. You make every single game become normal. Every single game has to be the same. It's got the same importance, it's got the same amount of points. It's about doing the same things. And to do that, you have to have a consistency. And right now, it seems to me that the noise is consistent and that is getting to the players. That's the biggest problem. I mean, even Kieran the other night, who's won a title at Arsenal, was talking about how it feels as though it's slipping away.
Yeah.
You're 5 points ahead. How can it be? I mean, that just seems to be the vibe coming from everywhere. Every fan, every player, the manager, the staff, everything coming out of Arsenal seems to be gloom and doom and things are slipping away, which is piling the pressure on game after game after game. Arteta has to take the air out the balloon and just get back to basics.
James, you know Mikel Arteta very well. Of course, you've spoken to him a lot. You're very close to Arsenal there. Do you feel like these big speeches and all the things that you feel he's saying to the media as well, are they just wearing thin?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's difficult for him to some extent because he has to find a different way of saying the same thing, which is we need to go one better than last season. You know, they've obviously had 3 consecutive second-place finishes, and as much as he tries to sort of talk around it, there is clearly a feeling of a glass ceiling above them that they're struggling to break. And, you know, I understand. I do have sympathy for him in that regard, but I think the team is playing as though it's inhibited at the moment. You know, they're not flowing in attack. They're not defending with the same kind of assurance and control and composure that they were earlier in the season. And so something around that messaging needs to change. I also think they probably need to give up on the whole Victor Gyökeres situation, because it's all well and good if the guy's not really delivering and you're defending so well that teams are not even getting shots away on your goal, and 1 goal or 2 goals is enough to win games. Because their defence is not quite as good as it has been of late, the whole Gyökeres issue and who plays centre forward and the lack of real attacking cohesion and their threat from open play is becoming more of a problem. And really, that's kind of been there all season long. What wasn't there earlier in the season was this defensive vulnerability that we're seeing now. And so if they're not going to be able to defend in the same way, then they really need to free themselves up in attack a bit more. And for me, that's probably taking Gyökeres out of the firing line a little bit. So there are things that Arteta can do, but he sort of strikes you as that kind of guy who's just going to double down and double down and double down on what he believes is right, because he feels that's the way you get through these difficult moments.
The one thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to was sometimes less is more. You know, with Arteta, you feel as though he's kicking every ball, which is okay, but he's constantly telling everybody what to do, when to do it, how to do it, should you do it, don't do it. Just give the players a little bit of space, give them a little bit of room, and just let them calm down and let them figure some things out themselves. Because if you're on the back constantly, again, all you're doing is putting more pressure on.
James, I want to talk to you about Eberechi Eze, because he played so well in the FA Cup, doing exactly what we expected him to do at Arsenal. You would think that Mikel Arteta would want him to build off of that performance in their next game against Wolves, but he found himself on the bench. What gives?
Yeah, and you're right to focus on him, because he's become a kind of symbol of that control sort of issue that there is at Arsenal at the moment. Look, I think the fact of the matter is he just doesn't trust him at the moment. I think he feels that, I mean, Eze started in a rare start in the league against Brentford and was taken off at half-time, and I was at that game, and you could see on the touchline that press box is quite close to the away dugout, and you could see he was getting into Eze sort of within half, not happy with the positions he was taking up, what he was trying to do with the ball. And for me, with Eze, there's a little bit of Grealish at City about it. It's sort of like they've almost taken a bit of the individual quality out of him, because Arteta likes his teams to be so sort of shape-driven and sort of try and control matches and not free the players up to maybe not track a runner and stay in space, and if the ball turns over, suddenly they're in a more advanced position. And Eze sort of caught between wanting to be the player he is on instinct and the player that Arsenal are trying to coach him to be. And I thought a couple of times recently he's looked like he's trying to play like Martin Odegaard, which is not really what he does. He needs to be, freer to just take players on and try and do sort of the unthinkable, the unpredictable, whereas obviously Odegaard is more of the tempo of the team and trying to get them playing and trying to get others into play. So he's become a kind of, a symbol of that frustration of, are they the team that they were last season, which is more about control, or are they the team that they were trying to be earlier this season, which is more direct, trying to get Gyökeres into the play earlier and trying to be more unpredictable in the final third, which obviously was one of the reasons why they brought Eze in.
Robert, what do you make of the Eze situation?
Well, when he was at Crystal Palace, I always thought that he was at his best when he was playing out on the left-hand side, but coming in from out to in runs. So he was almost playing through an inside left position. I never saw him as an out-and-out midfield player, because, as James just said, when he's in those forward areas, he can take people on, he can pick out a pass, he can drift into open space. He's clever with his movement. When he's playing in central midfield, he's in the FA Cup, he's passed it really well. But Arteta, as James said, hasn't got trust in his defensive qualities. Now, if you put a player in midfield and you don't trust his defensive qualities, then you've got a problem. So why did they actually buy him? Because if you look at the wide players, you've got Martinelli, Trossard, you've got Madueke, you've got Saka in those wide areas, you've got the likes of Odegaard, I know he's injured, Rice in midfield, Marino who can make forward runs. So I thought he was surplus to requirements in the first place. He's a very good player, but at the moment Arteta doesn't trust him, and I'm not sure he's going to play that many games from now to the end of the season, not in the big games especially.
Robert, what do you feel, or how do you feel about Bukayo Saka playing through the middle?
I can understand it. He's a player that could play anywhere, I think, in the front areas of the pitch. He's somebody that can drift past people. He can get a shot away. He can see a pass as well. I think he's very clever. He can play little 1-2s. I've got no problems with him playing in the number 10 role. I think he'll do it very well, particularly as Madueke has come into the side on the right-hand side of the pitch and done well when Saka's been injured. So I've got absolutely no problem with that. I think he can create goals, he can score goals, and he can be a top player there. He's a top player anyway.
Steve, if you're Eze, what are you thinking? How are you feeling watching all of this, especially seeing other players kind of playing out of position?
How am I getting a game? That's what I'm thinking. I mean, as a manager, you don't always want to show your hand if you can help it. But Arteta, when he played Saka through the middle, he absolutely told Eze where he is.
Yep.
He's thinking, okay, can I play Madueke and Saka in the same game? And if I do, Saka's through the middle. If I'm Eze, I'm thinking, hold on a second, what am I supposed to do? Yes, it's the FA Cup, but he steps in the FA Cup, has 2 incredible passes, world-class passes, has a great game, and then he's sitting on his backside and Saka's through the middle. If that doesn't scream, I don't fancy you, it's written all over it. So again, Arteta, I spoke about Arteta trying to take the air out of the balloon, and I 100% agree with James. This is going to be down to Arteta's management. I've already said I think he doesn't know how to take the air out of the balloon, but he's also playing with his players' heads as well. Because absolutely 100%, I'll be shocked if Ez is not sitting in a house right now thinking, I can have an extra couple of potatoes, because I ain't playing. I ain't playing against Spurs.
That's exactly what you'd be doing.
That's
I know
exactly
you love
what
a couple of potatoes.
It wouldn't be potatoes, it'd be something else, but I would probably be having it.
A couple of cold ones. All right, well, it is the North London derby, so let's look at the other side of North London. James, talking about Spurs here, of course, a lot of eyes on this one because it will be Igor Tudor at the helm. But I have to ask you, how did they end up deciding on him as interim manager? Because I don't think he was on any of our radars.
Yeah, well, this depends on who you talk to. My understanding is that Fabio Paratici was actually eyeing up Igor Tudor probably at the back end of last year, when there was a conversation internally about whether they would persevere with Thomas Frank. But there were a lot of internal politics going on at Spurs at the time, and Paratici was one of the co-sporting directors alongside Johan Lange, who had known Thomas Frank for about 20 years, dating back to their days in Copenhagen together. And Lange was really kind of all in on Frank, and there was a conversation at the time about, do we change or do we give him more time? To give him more time. Now, again, depending on who you talk to, Paratici didn't take that decision particularly well. He is obviously now no longer at the club. He's left and gone back to Italy. And Spurs have had to kind of own that decision. So if you follow that through, it does feel quite surprising that with Paratici no longer at the club, they see a guy who they were considering when he was still there. So it doesn't quite add up. And I have to say the sort of mood music behind the scenes and the way that they've tried to sort of brief and explain it hasn't really stood to reason. The one thing I would say is that there is data that suggests that when Tudor comes into a new club mid-season, every time he's done that, the points per game record has improved. There is data that shows that he can galvanise a team and get them playing quickly. But he's never managed in England. He's got, as he told us today, 13 fit senior players. It seems to be a hell of an arse to go and get a result against the league leaders first time out, even if the fans should be full and square behind them being the North London derby.
Yeah, well, Robert, we've had Kieran Gibbs on the show, and Kieran was saying that the biggest thing that strikes him about Spurs right now is just that they don't really have an identity at all. I know that you've watched Igor Tudor manage a lot, especially in Italy with Juventus and Lazio. So what should Spurs fans expect from his tenure?
Well, they're going to work hard. They're going to be well organised. They're going to make sure they defend well all over the pitch. They'll have a structure defensively. I'm not sure how they're going to go from the attacking side of the play, but I think they will be structured. They will be better than they were under Thomas Frank because they had no sort of strategy, both defensively and in attack. And what they will get now is the fans right behind them. So it's a move that they had to make. Thomas Frank, it doesn't matter if he'd won 5 on the trot, the fans would never have got behind him. The club was going nowhere. The team were going nowhere. This is a massive game for Spurs. It won't be it won't judge Igor Tudor on this game. But what they will be is harder to beat, I think, for Arsenal, and it will be a much tighter game than it would have been if Thomas Frank was there. So hard-working, well-organised, and I think they might go from back to front quite quickly in this game against Arsenal.
Well, Robert said something interesting there about the Spurs fans once again getting back behind them. James, that seems like a very tall ask right now based on what the Spurs fans have had to contend with this season. What is the mood like on that side of North London? And do you see the fans buying into this, considering it is still just an interim manager?
Yeah, the mood is awful. I mean, I was at the last, Thomas Frank's last games. It turned out to be a 2-1 home defeat to Newcastle. And I mean, it was toxic, not just aiming, obviously, their criticism at the dugout, but they were singing Mauricio Pochettino's name. They were jeering their own players at times. There's a real disconnect there at the moment. And, you know, without getting into the whole sort of last 6-8 months at Spurs, obviously there's been a lot of Daniel Levy, the former chairman, was such a lightning rod for all the criticism that now he's not there, the fans are kind of turning that frustration in all directions. And it is going to be difficult for Tudor to galvanise them. And while they probably don't want to play the Premier League leaders in their first game, it is the one fixture that you can kind of guarantee behind you for. So from that point of view, it is a useful fixture to have first up for Spurs. But really what they need to see is what they feel they haven't seen up until now, which is, as Robbo said earlier, the basics. They don't really feel as though they've seen a team that can defend properly, and certainly one that doesn't seem to really know how to attack. So the bar is pretty low. Get them running, get them well organised, and stay in the game, and that will be the key point. If they can just stay in the game against Arsenal, that will start to engender that belief, and the fans can really get behind something. But if they go behind early, you can just see it being potentially another very, very difficult afternoon for a group that are clearly lacking confidence and a bit of direction at the moment.
Stevie, how does Igor Tudor go into this one? Because I feel like we can't truly judge him harshly on this one if Spurs do end up losing. But as James said, if they get thrashed like they did last time, things could get even more toxic.
If and when they do get thrashed, because there's every likelihood they will. I mean, let's be honest. Yes, when the whistle goes, the fans will be behind them.
Yeah.
But you wonder, the first mistake, the first time Vicario does something crazy, you know, the first time the first goal goes in, you can just see the whole thing collapsing.
Yeah.
And you can see everybody piling on the players, which will end up being a thrashing. Listen, this guy has got one job between now and the end of the season, and that is to get the players to play for each other. Somehow, some way, whether it's through enjoying training or having days out or whatever it is, the only thing this guy has to do is get the players playing for each other. Because that's the only way they're going to pick points up is by covering each other's backside. And if he can do that, I think they got enough to stay in the Premier League. But if he can't get them to do that, they're in big, big trouble.
Big trouble indeed. So a big one on this weekend in the Premier League. James, how do you see this one going? Give us a prediction.
It's hard to see anything other than Arsenal winning, I think. I don't think it would be a cakewalk for them, but if I've got to go for a scoreline, I'll say 2-0 Arsenal.